The steel underfoot has borne the weight of 10,000 generations of the faithful, but their names are lost, their lives unrecorded. Somewhere within the endless honeycomb of hive terrors on the industrial world of Corvinus Prime, there is a single habitation unit, 77 Alpha 9998. It measures 12 meters by 8, 3 meters high. Inside this box of HAB standard dimensions, a family of 4 has endured for 37 years. The walls are coated in regulation ochre, a color chosen by administratum scholars who calculated that it would increase both productivity and obedience. The paint now curls and flakes in thin strips. This is the life of Matthias Vuhl, manufactorum worker, grade 7, husband to Sarah, father to the twins, Castor and Lydia. His entire existence plays out within these cramped confines. Overhead, pipes rattle with steaming water bound for the nobles in the spire above. Beneath the floor, the constant vibration of heavy machinery 15 levels down never truly stops. Sometimes, when the lumen strips flicker and dim, the walls themselves seem to expand and contract like the lungs of some buried creature. Matthias has never known another home. He was born in 77 Alpha 9998. His father lived here before him. His grandfather did as well. The lease, stamped and restamped by generations of minor clerks, bears the Imperial aquila and the seal of the planetary governor. It promises occupancy and perpetuity, so long as tithe quotas are fulfilled, so long as the work continues, so long as faith endures. The morning begins as it always has. The HAB's single chronometer, a brass relic older than anyone in the unit, chimes 6 times. The sound is thin and metallic, nearly swallowed by the endless drone of the ventilation system. The air carries promethium fumes, recycled breath, and something else. Something Matthias has noticed growing stronger over recent months. Something wet, organic, and wrong. Sarah rises first. She is 42, though the dim, unchanging light and stale air have carved extra years into her face. Her hands are permanently stained blue-green by the chemicals from the textile mill, where she runs loom 777 for 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. On the 7th day, she attends mandatory services at the local shrine, where Preacher Hanks recites the same passages of the Imperial Creed that have echoed down these corridors for centuries. His sermons speak of the Emperor's love, of humanity's destined dominion among the stars, of the great work that must be completed. Sarah mouths the words in silence, her lips cracked from processed bone-dry air. The 17-year-old twins sleep on fold-out cots that transform the main living area into their bedroom each night. Castor works 3rd shift in the plasma conduit maintenance bay. Lydia seals ration bars in the nutrition processing center. Both assignments were given on their 16th birthday by a local administratum official, a wan man with wire-rimmed spectacles who consulted several charts and declared their futures with all the emotion of someone reading out atmospheric pressure. Neither child has ever left sub-level gamma. Neither has seen real sunlight. Neither knows such a thing exists. Matthias pulls on his regulation gray jumpsuit, the uniform of a manufactorum worker. The fabric is coarse and abrasive, built to endure, not comfort. Comfort has no place in Imperial doctrine. Efficiency is paramount. Compliance is mandatory. Comfort breeds softness, and softness breeds heresy. He clips his identification tag to his chest. The photo on it was taken 23 years ago when he reported for duty for the first time. The young man in the image looks almost hopeful. The Matthias who faces the mirror no longer recognizes that expression. Their kitchen is a short stretch of counter, a protein synthesizer, and a water reclamation unit. The synthesizer dispenses 3 varieties of nutrient paste: gray, brown, and yellow. The gray provides baseline sustenance. The brown is enriched with synthetic proteins. The yellow includes vitamins to stave off the worst deficiencies of artificial diets. All three taste identical. The reclamation unit turns waste liquids into potable water using mechanisms Matthias neither understands nor feels the need to question. Understanding is unnecessary. Consumption is required. Breakfast is eaten in silence, not because of resentment or family discord, but because speech has become pointless. What is there to say? The work is unchanged. The quotas are unchanged. The regulations are unchanged. Yesterday was the same as today. Tomorrow will be the same as yesterday. This, they are told, is the Imperium's greatest gift, the removal of uncertainty. Every citizen is assigned a place, a purpose, a value in the greater machine. There is comfort in that, Preacher Hanks insists. There is peace in acceptance. But Matthias has begun to notice things that disturb that peace. It began 3 months earlier with a sound, a faint scratching from inside the walls. At first, he assumed it was age. 77. Alpha 9998 belongs to a residential block constructed in the 38th millennium. Annual structural reports, reviewed by the proper authorities, state that the building remains sound and suitable for habitation. Load-bearing walls are stable. Electrical systems operate within acceptable ranges. The plumbing provides adequate pressure. The scratching, Matthias told himself, must be ancient metal and rockcrete settling. Then the whispers started. Late at night, when Sarah and the twins are dead to the world from exhaustion, Matthias remains awake, listening to the familiar rhythm of the hab, the gurgle of overhead pipes, the distant rumble of machinery below, the occasional footsteps in the corridor outside. Now there is something new. Soft voices speaking in tones he cannot quite decipher. They seem to come from behind the wall that separates their living space from 77 Alpha 9997, where the Korvac family has resided for 19 years. But the timing makes no sense. The Korvacs work second shift. During these hours, they should be sleeping. Matthias has thought about reporting the disturbance to the Administratum office. Form 777 Delta allows citizens to file noise complaints. The process is simple enough. Fill out 3 copies, submit to the assigned clerk, wait for investigation and resolution. Yet he never quite brings himself to do it. Perhaps he fears that investigation might result in enforced relocation. Relocation would mean losing the only home his family has ever known. Or maybe he worries that the investigators will uncover something far worse than inconsiderate neighbors. Or perhaps it is that deep, instinctive understanding shared by Imperial citizens everywhere. Some things are better left unexamined. The wall itself is coated in the same regulation ochre as the others. It bears the usual scuffs and stains that accumulate over decades of use. There is nothing remarkable about it except for a thin crack high near the ceiling, one Matthias does not remember ever seeing before. The crack is about 15 centimeters long, barely noticeable unless you know where to look. When Matthias presses his ear close, the whispers grow a little clearer, though the words remain indistinct. For a time, work serves as a welcome distraction. The manufactorum where Matthias labors stretches across 7 sub-levels beneath the residential block. The journey down takes around 20 minutes on a series of lift platforms and connecting tunnels. The corridors are crowded with pipes, cabling, and ventilation shafts that vanish into darkness. Now and then he glimpses maintenance crews deeper in the gloom, their headlamps carving small circles of light in the murk. Matthias has never spoken to them. Their shifts do not align with his, and conversation between different worker classifications is discouraged unless properly authorized. The manufactorum floor itself is 2 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide. The ceiling hangs 20 meters overhead, held up by colossal steel beams that cast strict, angular shadows across the production lines. The air reeks of heated metal, machine lubricants, and the sharp tang of ozone from plasma cutters. Noise is omnipresent and crushing, the rhythmic hammering of hydraulic presses, the whine of cutting tools, the hiss of coolant systems. Workers communicate by gestures and brief shouts. Anything more is impossible. Matthias runs Assembly Station 47, installing guidance systems into artillery shells bound for the Imperial Guard. Each shell matches the last. Each demands the exact same sequence of actions. Insert the guidance module, align the connectors, apply sealant, run diagnostics, pass the shell to the next station. The work demands focus, but never imagination. Imagination is dangerous. Any departure from authorized procedure triggers immediate quality inspection and possible punishment. The shells Matthias tends will one day be fired from basilisk platforms on distant worlds whose names he will never hear. They will burst among enemies whose faces he will never see. Their fragments will tear through bodies of soldiers whose dying thoughts will dwell on homes they will never return to. This does not trouble Matthias. It is not intended to. His part in the vast chain of Imperial war production is small but essential. Without his work, the shells would fail. Without the shells, the artillery is worthless. Without the artillery, worlds fall to Xenos or heretics. Without the Emperor's shield, humanity would be swallowed by the dark between the stars. This logic governs every choice, every motion, every heartbeat within the Imperium. The work shift ends as it begins, with the chronometer's chime. 12 hours after they start, the manufactorum workers set down their tools and begin the long ride back up. The lifts raise them through the same tunnels as before. The shift from harsh, blinding work lights to the muted amber glow of the hab levels leaves many squinting. Some rub their eyes. Others blink against the gloom. Matthias simply stares ahead, already turning his thoughts to the evening routine. Sarah, whose shift at the textile mill ends half an hour earlier, has dinner ready when he returns. Their meal is protein paste augmented with synthesized vegetables and a small carbohydrate supplement. The vegetables are grown in hydroponic bays 3 levels beneath the residential block. They are pale and nearly flavorless, engineered for nutritional efficiency rather than enjoyment. The workers who tend the bays are classified as agricultural specialists and receive slightly larger rations in recognition of their importance. Sarah sometimes imagines what it might be like to work among living plants instead of machinery and chemical baths. But daydreaming is not the same as submitting a transfer request, and transfers require justifications more substantial than personal longing. Castor arrives as the family finishes eating. His work in the plasma conduit maintenance bay exposes him to radiation levels considered acceptable by official standards, but leaves him perpetually fatigued. His skin has taken on a thin, translucent cast, blue veins visible beneath the surface. Once a month, plasma workers report to the clinic for screenings. The results are forwarded to the authorities, never to the workers themselves. Castor knows only that he is cleared to continue. That is all he needs. Lydia's shift at the Nutrition Processing Center ends long after the others have retired. She slips into the hab near midnight, moving quietly so as not to wake them. Her job is to seal individual ration packs and affix the proper labels. The labels list nutritional values, expiry dates, and distribution categories. Some are for general issue, others are for designated groups: children, pregnant women, hazardous duty workers, clergy, military personnel. The quality of rations rises or falls depending on the recipient's usefulness to Imperial society. It is not openly discussed, but every citizen learns the hierarchy by experience. Evenings in 77, Alpha 9998, follow a fixed pattern. Sarah carries out maintenance tasks, cleaning the synthesizer filters, checking the reclamation unit, scanning the hab for damage or wear. Matthias works through production reports and quality forms on his data slate. The twins study technical manuals relevant to their positions, memorizing safety protocols and efficiency targets. Formal schooling ended years ago, but ongoing training is compulsory. Knowledge that does not serve the Emperor is considered wasteful. Tonight, however, Matthias cannot focus on his forms. The whispers return. They start as they always do, faint and blurred, as if seeping out of the very rockcrete. But this time, there is something new in their tone. They sound urgent, almost pleading. Matthias sets his data slate aside and moves toward the wall. Sarah, focused on her tasks, does not notice. Castor is already asleep, his breathing shallow and uneven. Pressing his ear to the wall, Matthias listens. The voices are definitely coming from beyond the surface, but their origin is still uncertain. They could be from 77 Alpha 9997, but the Korvac family consists of only 3 people, Rick, his wife Elena, and their daughter Mira. The voices he hears number more than that. 6 or 7 at least, overlapping, weaving together in such a way that no single phrase stands out. The crack in the wall has grown. Once 15 centimeters, it now stretches almost 30 toward the floor. Its edges are wrong, not the clean, straight fractures of settling metal, but warped and irregular, branching like the limbs of a diseased tree. When Matthias runs his fingers along it, the wall feels warm. That should be impossible. The internal walls are not linked to heating systems, and the hab's ambient temperature remains fixed at 18 degrees. In the weeks that follow, more changes creep into 77 Alpha 998. The protein synthesizer occasionally dispenses paste that smells faintly spoiled. Water from the reclamation unit sometimes carries a metallic tang that clings to the tongue for hours. The old chronometer, accurate for decades, starts to fall behind, losing minutes every day. Worst of all, Sarah and the twins seem unaware of any of it. When Matthias mentions the strange smells or tastes, they only blink at him, confused, slightly worried. Life outside the hab goes on unchanged. The manufactorum runs on schedules set by the administratum and enforced by shift supervisors, who answer to production coordinators, who answer to sector chiefs, who serve at the governor's pleasure. The chain of command stretches upward through layer upon layer of bureaucracy until it disappears into the heights of imperial authority. At each level, decisions are based on data from the layer below. Information climbs the hierarchy, filtered and compressed into figures on a report that barely resemble the reality lived by workers like Matthias. Assembly Station 47 continues to turn out guidance systems. The quota remains fixed, 47 units per shift. Quality standards do not shift, 0 tolerance for defects, 0 tolerance for deviation. The rhythm repeats, insert, align, seal, test, pass. But Matthias's focus frays. His thoughts drift back to the whispers, the growing crack, the subtle contamination in his home that nobody else can perceive. In the 3rd week, his shift supervisor notices. Vela is a thin woman who has held her position for 8 years. During a scheduled inspection, she approaches his station, data slate in hand, ready to log in fractions. "Worker Vul," she says, her voice a narrow thread against the clamor of machines. "Your completion rate has declined by 7% over the last 10 days. Matthias keeps working as he answers. It is considered disrespectful to stop and face a supervisor during inspection. Such behavior invites disciplinary action. I was not aware of the drop, Supervisor Vela. I will increase my focus and correct the deficiency. Production standards exist for the good of the Emperor and the citizens under his protection." Vela continues. "When one worker fails to meet quota, all others must compensate. This creates inefficiency and lowers total output." "I understand, Supervisor. The deficiency will be corrected." She makes several entries on her data slate. Those lines become part of Matthias's permanent record, accessible to any future supervisor or functionary who may one day review his worth to the Imperium. 3 negative evaluations within 6 months mean mandatory re-education. 5 result in job reassignment. 7 trigger review by the local arbitrator, whose responses may include fines, imprisonment, or, in severe cases, servitor conversion. Imperial citizens do not experience this system as fear. Fear would imply doubt in the Emperor's justice. Instead, it produces meticulous attention to duty and strict adherence to regulations. In 23 years of service, Matthias has received only 2 negative evaluations, both minor documentation errors. By Manufactorum standards, his record is exemplary. This recent decline in performance is therefore an anomaly that must be corrected. But correction is hard when one's attention is constantly pulled toward things that should not exist. The whispers are no longer confined to the night. What was once a phenomenon of darkness has slipped into the routines of daily life. Matthias hears the voices over breakfast, while preparing for his shift, and when he tries to complete his evening paperwork. They seem to call specifically to him, though the words still refuse to resolve into clarity. Now and then, he hears something that sounds almost like his own name, stretched and distorted as though spoken through water or thick glass. Sarah has begun to show concern. During their brief evening conversations, she comments on his habit of staring at the walls, his distraction during meals, his tendency to press his ear to surfaces as if listening for something. Her worry is genuine but limited. Imperial citizens are not trained in mental health or psychology. Those skills belong to medical specialists and sanctioned clergy, each filling precise roles within the Imperial hierarchy. Sarah knows only that her husband has changed, and change without clear cause is always cause for worry. "Perhaps you should speak with Preacher Hanks," she suggests one night as they prepare to sleep. "He has experience helping workers with spiritual difficulties. It is a reasonable suggestion." Preacher Hanks has served the local shrine for 12 years, guiding many citizens through doubt and confusion. His methods blend scripture with practical advice, helping troubled souls align their inner turmoil with their duties to the Imperium. But Matthias hesitates to bring a priest into this. Hanks is bound by regulation to report certain problems up the chain of command. Spiritual corruption, heretical thoughts, signs of mutation, or psychic activity. All of these require escalation. "I will consider it," Matthias tells Sarah. "I believe the problem will resolve in time." This is not true. He does not expect it to resolve. If anything, he anticipates further escalation. The crack in the wall lengthens by the day. The whispers grow more frequent, more insistent. The subtle wrongness in the hab becomes more pronounced. But telling Sarah all of that would only share the burden and drag her into something he himself barely understands. He is not sure that would be fair or safe. He decides instead on investigation. That decision does not come easily. Imperial citizens are conditioned from birth to report anomalies, not analyze them. The channels are clearly laid out. Citizens report to local administrators, administrators to sector coordinators, coordinators to planetary officials, officials to subsector command, command to Imperial governors. At each level, trained specialists decide on the proper response. For 10,000 years, this system has kept order across millions of worlds and trillions of lives. But the system assumes that citizens can recognize when something is truly out of the ordinary. Matthias is no longer certain that he can. The whispers could be nothing more than odd echoes in an aging structure. The expanding crack might be the result of normal settling or temperature shifts. The strange tastes and smells could come from minor equipment faults or from his own heightened stress. Without clear evidence of real danger, lodging a formal report might be premature and could invite an intrusive investigation into his family and neighbors. So he begins with careful observation. Matthias starts documenting the whispers, noting their time, duration, apparent origin, and any words he thinks he hears. He measures the crack in the wall each night, tracking its growth and changes in shape. He keeps logs on the protein synthesizer and water reclamation unit, recording any deviations in quality. His method is systematic, patterned on the analytical approaches taught to Manufactorum workers for quality control. The resulting records disturb him. The whispers occur most often between 2200 and 0200 hours, when most residents are asleep. The crack grows at roughly 2 centimeters per day, but its expansion speeds up during whisper episodes. The equipment failures correlate with both the whispers and the crack's growth. All three phenomena appear linked. Most troubling of all, Matthias eventually finds he can pick out individual words. The voices speak of hunger, of darkness, of spaces between spaces where the Emperor's light does not reach. They mention names that feel almost familiar, just beyond his memory. They describe places that seem to exist inside the walls themselves. Vast caverns and twisted passageways extending beyond anything the building's physical limits should allow. At that point, Matthias realizes this may be beyond the scope of a single worker's inquiry. The local administratum office is located on the third sub-level of the government complex, 12 levels above the residential zones but still far below the spire, where the highest planetary officials conduct their affairs. This office serves citizens from 7 residential sectors, handling documentation, complaints, and administrative requests. Its waiting area contains 40 seats arranged in precise rows facing a service counter staffed by 3 clerks. Each seat is filled by a citizen clutching forms, vouchers, or data slates, waiting for their number to appear on the lumen board. Matthias holds complaint form 777 Delta, completed in triplicate as required. The form allows him to report noise disturbances, structural irregularities, malfunctioning equipment, and other issues affecting HAB survivability. He has filled it out carefully, describing the whispers as unusual acoustic phenomena, the crack as a minor structural irregularity, and the equipment issues as intermittent performance variations. The language is deliberately neutral and technical, steering well clear of anything that could be interpreted as supernatural or heretical. When his number is called, he steps up to the counter where Clerk Valdris, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and ink-stained fingers, reviews the paperwork. HAB Unit 77, Alpha 9998, Valdris reads. Acoustic phenomena, structural irregularity, equipment variations. How long have these been occurring? Approximately 6 weeks for the acoustic phenomena, 4 weeks for the structural issue, 3 weeks for the equipment problems, Matthias answers. Valdris makes notes on his data slate. Have you consulted your neighbors about similar experiences? It is a standard question, meant to determine whether this is an isolated concern or part of a larger problem. Matthias has not. The Korvac family of 77 Alpha 9997 works different shifts. He rarely crosses paths with them. In 77 Alpha 999 lives the Brennis couple, elderly and reclusive, who mainly communicate via written notes left outside their door. I have not consulted my neighbors, he says. Investigation protocol requires neighbor consultation prior to administrative review, Valdris explains. Please complete verification form 222 Alpha with statements from adjacent residents, then return for processing. The additional form requires written statements from the residents of 77 Alpha 9997 and 77 Alpha 999, confirming whether they have observed similar irregularities. Each statement must be signed, dated, and include official identification numbers for verification. Only then can a formal investigation begin. This requirement introduces complications Matthias had not foreseen. Approaching neighbors about sensitive issues demands careful respect for privacy laws and social norms. Citizens are expected to maintain proper distance from one another while still cooperating in matters of shared concern. Misjudging that balance can lead to personal strain or official scrutiny. Visiting the Korvacs proves difficult from the start. Matthias knocks on the door of 77 Alpha 9997 in the evening, when he believes they should be home from second shift. The door opens not to Hendrik or Elena Korvac, but to a young woman he does not recognize. She appears to be in her 20s, with pale skin and dark hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her clothes are standard civilian issue, but her bearing feels different, as though she does not truly belong here. Yes, she asks, opening the door only enough to reveal her face. I am Matthias Vuhl from 77 Alpha 998, he says. I need to speak with the Korvac family regarding an administrative matter. Her expression barely changes, although her eyes flick briefly over her shoulder before she answers. The Korvacs are not available at this time. Perhaps you could return at a more convenient hour. The response is strange. Second-shift workers should be at home during the evening, and administrative business usually overrides personal convenience. Matthias considers pressing for more detail, but something in her manner dissuades him. "May I ask when would be a more convenient time?" he tries. "I will inform them of your visit," she replies. "They will contact you if they wish to discuss the matter." The door closes before he can respond. He stands in the corridor for a few moments, turning over what just occurred. The young woman could be a relative or friend, though such visitors are usually registered in advance with building management. She might be a temporary official assignment, but those are normally announced to neighboring units. Or she could be someone who is not meant to be there at all. His attempt with the Brennis family is more straightforward, though no less unsettling. When he knocks at 77 Alpha 999, he is greeted by Marcus Brennies, an elderly man who spent 25 years in atmospheric processing before being reassigned to document filing. Marcus listens carefully as Matthias explains the administrative requirement. "Unusual sounds, you say?" Marcus asks, his voice tinged with concern. "Elena and I have noticed irregularities ourselves, mainly temperature fluctuations and some electrical anomalies. This is both encouraging and disturbing. Encouraging because it suggests the issue is not confined to Matthias's hab. Disturbing because it implies a broader fault, potentially affecting the entire block." Marcus agrees to provide a written statement, but he adds a suggestion. "Perhaps we should coordinate our efforts," he says. "If multiple units are affected, a joint complaint may receive more serious attention. It is a reasonable idea from an efficiency standpoint, but it goes far beyond Matthias's original plan. Joint complaints require more paperwork, coordination between families, and increased administrative visibility. They also suggest a level of resident organization that might be interpreted as unauthorized collective action. Imperial rules on such matters are complex. Citizens may band together for legitimate reasons, work, worship, community maintenance, but must avoid any form of unsanctioned organization that could challenge existing authority or form alternative power structures. The line between acceptable cooperation and forbidden assembly is hazy, and citizens are expected to judge their own behavior accordingly. After careful thought, Matthias agrees. The potential benefit outweighs the risk, especially if their problems are indeed part of a larger pattern. Marcus's familiarity with paperwork could help steer them through the process. Over the next 3 days, they prepare the joint complaint. Marcus and Matthias meet each evening after their shifts, comparing observations and merging their records. Their discussions take place in the corridor outside their units. Regulations discourage extended visits between families without authorization. They speak in low tones so as not to disturb other residents, though Matthias can't help but notice how unusually empty the corridor seems during these meetings. The data they compile together is more unsettling than either expected. Marcus's electrical anomalies line up almost perfectly with the timing of Matthias's whispers. Both families report pattern-matched equipment malfunctions. Most alarming of all, Marcus describes a structural irregularity in his own hab, a crack in the wall shared with 77 Alpha 99998. His crack is about 45 centimeters long, extending from the floor toward the ceiling. Like Matthias's, it is oddly curved and organic rather than clean and straight. Marcus has been tracking its growth as well and finds it expands at roughly 2 centimeters per day, the same rate Matthias recorded. The correlation is too exact to dismiss as coincidence. But the worst revelation comes when Marcus mentions the sounds he has heard from within the wall. They are not whispers like Matthias hears, but rhythmic scratching accompanied by what he can only describe as breathing. The sounds occur during the same time window as the whispers. Both phenomena appear to originate from the same hidden space between the two heads. This raises deeply troubling questions. According to the building's architectural plans, publicly accessible at the administratum office, the walls of adjacent HAB units are separated by 15 centimeters of insulation and support structures. This gap is not meant to accommodate any kind of movement, much less habitation. It exists solely to ensure structural stability and environmental isolation. Yet the sounds reported by both men strongly imply that something is in that space. Something that moves, something that breathes, something that may even speak. Something that, by every rational measure, should not exist. The joint complaint they ultimately submit, prepared in quintuplicate, is the most detailed document either man has ever presented to authority. It includes exact measurements, time logs, correlation analyses, and signed statements from both families. The language remains deliberately clinical and technical, avoiding even a hint of the supernatural or heretical. The request itself is simple: an investigation by qualified authorities and corrective action to restore normal living conditions. Clerk Valdris reviews the joint complaint with palpable interest. He seems impressed by the thoroughness of their work, asking precise questions about how they measured, observed, and recorded each phenomenon. His questions feel like genuine professional curiosity rather than doubt. For the first time, Matthias allows himself a sliver of hope that their situation will be taken seriously. This level of coordinated documentation is exceptional, Valdris remarks as he studies the final pages. Most citizen complaints lack sufficient detail for proper evaluation. Your approach shows admirable dedication to administrative efficiency. The praise is gratifying, but Matthias keeps his attention fixed on practical outcomes. He asks the only question that matters: what is the expected timeline for investigation and resolution? Standard protocol requires initial assessment within 10 working days, Valdris explains. Depending on the findings, additional investigation may be required. Complex structural or environmental issues sometimes demand specialist consultation, which can extend the process considerably. 10 working days means 2 full work weeks in which the problems in both HAB units will continue to advance. The cracks will lengthen, the sounds will grow more frequent, and whatever lurks in the space between the walls will have more time to entrench itself. The timeline is far from ideal, but it is the best that official channels can offer. As Matthias and Marcus leave the administratum office, both men understand they have entered a process whose outcome is uncertain. Their joint complaint has been accepted and filed. But what the investigation finds may require solutions far more drastic than a simple maintenance visit. If the problems in their units are part of a larger structural fault, they may face forced relocation. If the issues are blamed on aging equipment or design flaws, they might be held liable for upgrade costs beyond their means. Worst of all, if the investigators uncover phenomena that defy conventional explanation, Matthias and Marcus could find themselves under suspicion. Imperial authorities are trained to consider every possibility, including the chance that the citizens who report problems may themselves be part of the problem. Yet these worries must be weighed against the certainty that doing nothing will allow the situation to worsen. The whispers in Matthias's wall are growing more frequent, more desperate. The cracks in both HABs continue to spread. The equipment malfunctions have begun to affect the food and water on which both families rely. Whatever is happening in 77 Alpha 9998 and 77 Alpha 9999 cannot be allowed to continue indefinitely. When the investigation finally begins, it reveals just how large the problem has become. Administrative investigator Teresa Vance arrives at the residential complex on the morning of the 8th working day after the complaint. She is accompanied by Building Inspector Jonas Kreiber and Technical Specialist Lisa Morrison. A full investigation team indicating the administratum has taken their documentation seriously. The team brings specialized equipment for structural analysis, environmental sampling, and data recording. Matthias and Marcus meet them in the corridor outside their HAB units, having both taken leave from work for the day. Losing a day's wages is a real hardship, But cooperation with an official investigation takes precedence over personal finances. Vance begins by reviewing the joint complaint and asking a series of detailed questions about the nature and timing of each reported problem. Her questioning is thorough and professional, touching on aspects Matthias and Marcus had not considered important. She asks about sleep pattern changes, appetite variations, unusual dreams, or intrusive thoughts that might coincide with the onset of the anomalies. Her line of inquiry suggests experience with cases that go beyond faulty pipes and aging rockcrete. The physical inspection starts with Kreiber's examination of the cracks. Using precision instruments, he confirms the dimensions and growth rates recorded by the residents. But he also notes details invisible to untrained eyes. The cracks do not follow ordinary patterns of structural settling or thermal expansion. Instead, they thread through the wall along paths of least resistance, creating curved channels that maximize surface area while minimizing actual load damage. This is not typical crack propagation, Kreiber tells the team. The pattern suggests external pressure being applied from within the wall space, yet the building specifications list no services or structural elements that are capable of generating such force. Meanwhile, Morrison begins her environmental analysis. She uses instruments Matthias has never seen before, checking air composition, temperature gradients, electromagnetic fluctuations, and acoustic profiles across both units. Her devices beep and flash as they collect data, which she reviews with increasing intensity. Atmospheric anomalies in both units, she reports. Humidity levels higher than allowed by central controls, trace organic compounds of unknown origin, and low-frequency acoustic emissions that do not match any of the building's mechanical systems. The investigators exchange looks that suggest these results match something they've seen or been warned about before. Vance continues making notes while Kreiber photographs the cracks from multiple angles. Morrison moves methodically through each room, taking repeated readings. It is Morrison who discovers the most disturbing evidence. Using a fiber optic probe inserted into the crack in Matthias's wall, she peers into the space that should separate the two HAB units. What she finds contradicts everything the construction records describe. The gap between the walls is not a narrow strip of insulation and supports. Instead, it opens into a cavity extending far beyond the building's documented dimensions. The interior space is significantly larger than indicated by the plans, Morrison reports, her professional tone tinged with concern. I'm detecting air movement consistent with a much larger hollow region. The probe is encountering no resistance after 2 meters of extension. That should be impossible given the structural layout. At Vance's request, Morrison advances more equipment, additional sensors, and a miniature camera that relays imagery to her monitor. The images that flicker onto the screen show a space that defies rational explanation. The cavity stretches far above and below the camera's limited illumination. The walls within are not the expected metal and rockcrete, but appear organic, surfaces with shifting textures that seem to move when observed. The air inside the space circulates in patterns suggesting some form of respiration or unnatural convection, though no fans or vents are visible. Most unsettling of all, the camera captures movement. Shadows glide past, with no clearly visible source. Shapes that seem almost familiar vanish into the dark before they can be identified. At one point, the footage reveals markings etched into the organic-looking surfaces. Characters or symbols that do not match any language Morrison recognizes. I need to report these findings to Sector Command immediately, Vance says after reviewing the footage. This investigation is now outside the scope of standard habitability assessment. Both Matthias and Marcus grasp the implications. When an investigation exceeds standard scope, higher authorities with specialized powers become involved. The ecclesiarchy may be called if spiritual taint is suspected. The Adeptus Mechanicus may intervene if techno-heresy is possible, and if the signs point toward chaos or Xenos influence, the Inquisition itself might take interest. While Vance communicates via secure Vox, Kreiber continues his structural checks. He finds that the anomalous cracks are no longer confined to the shared wall. Similar fissures, smaller but bearing the same organic curvature, appear near the entrance doors, the outer walls, and along floor-wall junctions. The building is developing a network of interconnected openings with no precedent in normal structural behavior. These cannot be written off as random damage. The cracks are forming a pattern, opening pathways through the solidity of the structure, connecting spaces that were never meant to be linked. Morrison's ongoing monitoring reveals that the environmental anomalies are also spreading. Her instruments detect similar irregularities in neighboring units, even though those residents have not filed complaints. Either the phenomena are just beginning in those locations, or the occupants are ignoring or hiding their experiences. The team spends 6 hours documenting everything before Vance receives a response from Sector Command. The instructions arrive through encrypted transmission and are not shared in full with Matthias or Marcus. Instead, Vance informs them that their HAB units have been classified as temporarily uninhabitable pending specialized assessment. They are ordered to relocate within 48 hours. The relocation order is not unexpected, but its urgency implies that the situation is considered immediately hazardous. Matthias and Marcus receive housing requisition forms entitling their families to temporary residence in vacant units elsewhere in the hive. The guarantee extends for 30 days, after which their status will be reviewed in light of the specialized assessment's conclusions. Just as the team prepares to withdraw, Morrison makes a final discovery that changes everything. Performing one last scan in Matthias's unit, she detects thermal signatures inside the wall spaces. These signatures do not match known vermin or small animals that might infest old structures. They indicate creatures of substantial size, possibly humanoid, whose body temperature sits slightly below normal human levels. "There's something alive in there," Morrison announces, her composure beginning to fray. "Multiple entities, 6 or 7, based on thermal distribution. They're positioned in a pattern that matches the reported acoustic phenomena. The whispers Matthias has been hearing are not random echoes. They are conversations, communications between living beings who have somehow made their home within the walls, watching his family, listening to their words, studying their habits through cracks they have carefully widened into viewing ports." Vance immediately relays this new information to Sector Command. The response is immediate and unequivocal. The entire residential complex is to be evacuated pending the arrival of specialized response teams. All residents are to be moved to temporary facilities where they will be questioned individually. The building is to be sealed and placed under administrative quarantine. The evacuation begins only hours after the investigators leave. Notices appear in every corridor, informing residents they have 12 hours to gather essentials and report to assembly points for transport. The posted reason is urgent maintenance requirements. No mention is made of parasitic habitation or impossible interior cavities. Matthias packs with shaking hands, trying to follow procedure despite the tremor in his fingers. Sarah asks questions he cannot answer without violating instructions not to discuss the details. The twins, with the resilience of youth, treat the evacuation as an unexpected change of scenery rather than a looming disaster. But as Matthias loads their few possessions onto the transport, he cannot escape the knowledge that they are leaving more than a home behind. They are leaving something that has been observing them, learning them, perhaps preparing to act, and the evacuation is meant to prevent that act. The beings in the walls remain. Their intentions and capacities are unknown. The temporary housing facility is located in a different hive sector within a converted manufactorum complex. The quarters are sparse but adequate, single-family rooms with basic amenities, communal mess areas, and shared recreation spaces. Evacuated families from 77 Alpha 998 and other affected units are housed apart from the general population, a clear sign that the authorities consider them to require special oversight or protection. Individual interviews begin on the second day. Matthias is questioned by a team whose affiliations are not disclosed. They ask detailed questions about his experiences, observations, and relationships, his neighbors, his work routines, his family dynamics. Everything is mapped and recorded. The interviewers show particular interest in the whispers and his ability to understand fragments of speech. They press him to repeat every word he can remember, to describe the tone, number, and emotional quality of the voices, and to speculate, cautiously, about their intent. Their questions suggest a framework for understanding such events, as if this is not the first time they have dealt with something like this. When Matthias asks in return about the specialized assessment of his old heb, the officials remain vague. The matter is being handled by appropriate authorities. The situation is under control. He is not told what the thermal signatures ultimately revealed, whether the beings have been eliminated, contained, or simply left alone. He is given no indication of whether anyone will ever be allowed to live in that building again. Information flows one way, from the evacuees to the authorities. Sarah and the twins undergo similar questioning, though their sessions are shorter. Sarah reports nothing out of the ordinary, beyond her husband's increasingly unusual behavior. The twins confirm they never heard whispers, never noticed cracks as anything more than background wear. This pattern repeats across most evacuees. Only certain individuals perceived the full extent of the anomalies. The phenomena were selective, not universal. Marcus Brennis, whose logs and observations were crucial to the joint complaint, is questioned at greatest length. For 3 days, he is asked to review architectural diagrams, examine photographs of other cases, and provide detailed commentary on his recordings and measurements. The depth of scrutiny makes it clear that their case has implications that reach beyond a single residential block. The housing facility enforces regulations that discourage detailed conversations about what happened. Meal shifts are staggered to keep former neighbors apart. Recreation schedules limit time spent with familiar faces. These measures are described as logistical necessities, but their true effect is to prevent evacuees from comparing notes or forming a shared understanding of events. 3 weeks into the relocation, Matthias receives a notice. His family has been approved for permanent rehousing. Their new assignment is in another residential complex on sub-level Delta, 2 levels above their old home, similar in structure but slightly improved in size and amenity. The notice includes transport arrangements, utility schedules, and updated work assignments for the whole family, all conveniently relocated near the new hab. The promotion in living conditions is real, but it also confirms what Matthias has suspected. They will never see 77 Alpha 9998 again. Whatever has happened there, and whatever continues to happen, is no longer their concern. They are being lifted out of reach of the phenomenon, and out of reach of any answer. The day before their move, Matthias spots investigator Vance in a corridor of the temporary facility. She is touring with 2 other officials, clearly inspecting, reviewing, concluding. When she sees him, she steps forward with a composed, professional expression that might also hold a hint of genuine regard. "Mr. Vull," she says, "I wanted to inform you personally that your cooperation during the investigation has been exemplary. Your documentation and observations significantly contributed to our understanding of the situation." Matthias thanks her, then asks the question that has haunted him. Was the problem resolved? Are the other residents safe? Vance pauses, clearly choosing her words with care. The situation has been contained through appropriate measures. The residents who were relocated are safe and will remain safe in their new accommodations. That is the extent of the information I can provide. The word contained stands out. Containment implies that whatever was in the walls still exists, but has been prevented from spreading. It suggests that the beings whose whispers he heard are still there, buried in organic caverns behind sealed walls, continuing their unknown activities beyond human sight. Will other residential complexes be inspected for similar problems? He asks. Appropriate precautionary measures are being implemented across all relevant facilities, Vance replies. Citizens should continue to report unusual phenomena through established channels. The Emperor protects those who remain vigilant in their service to the Imperium. Her answer fits the standard pattern: acknowledgement without detail, reassurance without revelation. It is exactly the sort of statement an Imperial citizens learn to recognize as code for "there are serious problems, but they are not for you to understand." The conversation ends with the expected courtesies. Matthias is left with the certainty that his questions will never be fully answered. The official records will show that 77 Alpha 99998 experienced structural and environmental anomalies requiring evacuation and specialized remediation. The true nature of what lived in the walls, what it wanted, what it might have accomplished if undiscovered, will be classified, accessible only to those with clearance and a supposed need to know. Their new HAB unit in sub-level Delta is designated 44 Beta 775. It measures 14 meters by 10, with 3.5 meters of height, noticeably more spacious than their old quarters. The walls are painted regulation ochre, but the paint is fresh, smooth, and unblemished. The protein synthesizer dispenses paste that tastes exactly as it should. The water reclamation unit runs clean and odorless. The chronometer keeps flawless time. Matthias's new work assignment places him at Assembly Station 23 in another manufactorum complex. The job is identical: installing guidance systems into artillery shells destined for the Imperial Guard. The quota remains 47 units per shift. The quality standards remain absolute. The cycle of insert, align, seal, test, pass continues. On quiet evenings, though, when Sarah and the twins are occupied with their own duties, Matthias finds himself listening to the walls of 44 Beta 775. He presses his ear to the smooth ochre surface, straining for sounds that should not exist. The walls stay silent, filled only with the approved insulation and supports that the plans describe. And yet, in the deepest hours, when even the building's machinery seems to sleep, Matthias sometimes feels, rather than hears, something moving in the spaces between spaces. Not in his HAB, but somewhere else, in the vast honeycomb of the hive. Somewhere in the darkness between levels, in forgotten maintenance shafts, in sealed zones that no longer appear on any map. The whispers, he suspects, have been contained, not silenced. They continue elsewhere, calling to other citizens who lie awake in their regulation beds, puzzled by noises that seep from the walls. Citizens who will begin to notice cracks widening day by day, synthesizers producing strange flavors, chronometers that slowly fall behind. The great machine of Imperial society grinds on, processing lives through assigned roles, maintaining quotas and standards in the Emperor's name. But within that machine, in the gaps between official reports and lived reality, other things are growing, whispering, waiting. In 77, Alpha 9998, the sealed walls breathe steadily in the dark, and something that was never human dreams of the day when every HAB unit will echo, with voices speaking of hunger and darkness and the spaces between spaces where the Emperor's light has never shone. The evacuation notices have been taken down. The building remains officially uninhabitable. Yet on certain nights, when the wind carries sound from the quarantined block, citizens in far-off sectors report hearing whispers that call their names. Cracks begin to appear in walls that have been solid for decades. The average home in the Imperium shelters far more than its inhabitants realize, and some shelters were never meant for human occupancy at all.